Hello and welcome. We are going to be painting a pumpkin today with a heavy-bodied acrylic. The colors we're going to be using are burnt umber, titanium white, emerald green, and chrome yellow. We're going to be using two different brushes. So we'll be using a fine point brush like this one. And this is a very inexpensive brush. And we'll be using a nylon 1.5-inch construction brush. I'm going to start out with a little titanium white and burnt umber. I'm just going to blend. I'm picking up a healthy amount of white and then grab a little bit of brown to get just I'm going to do a rustic type light color there. And I'm going to dry brush around the edges first. So I don't want all this paint on my brush. It's a lot of paint. And this is just a very cheap 1.25-inch construction brush. Very, very cheap. So I'm just going to kind of dab outside, make sure I don't have that much paint on my brush, and then just kind of go in from the outer edge. Just in from the outer edge here. And just to give myself a little bit of what I'm going for here is just kind of like a frame or some kind of burlap maybe look. Just a little, some shadowing, I guess you could say. Now this paper, this canvas paper, is really affordable if you're not a real experienced painter, or you just want to paint and you don't want to invest a lot of money in it. This paper is about $12 for 60 sheets, and it's nice thick paper. You can get it at Walmart for pretty cheap. Okay, so I'm not able to get the bottom like I want to here. Just kind of. Now I'm going to pick myself up just a little bit more and give myself some depth in the background here. Now I'm not like a professional painter. I love to paint. I'm pretty good with acrylics, and I'm just not 100% professional. But okay, that's a little too much, a little too light. I want it a little darker than that. And a little thinner. And I'm just going to keep kind of going in, give myself a little bit of background from the outer edges in. It's kind of drawing the eye into the center here, but I don't want to paint the center because I'm going to do a white pumpkin. And that's a bit of a mess there, but the white pumpkin I'm going for is that one. I might do an orange one behind it. I don't know. I'm just still thinking about it. But that white pumpkin is a perfect look. I love it, the way it looks. I like the shape of it. I like the angle of it. I like this nice round stem. So there it is. Actually, you can't really see it from my angle very well. Anyway, so there it is. Once I'm happy with my background and it is completely dry, I can start drawing my pumpkin. So I like to have an outline of what I'm going to paint, and I'm just using the pumpkin as a guide. And I'm trying to get the stem right. The stem has a curve to it, a twist to it. So I'm trying to get the stem right and the shape of the pumpkin. You can try as many times as you like to get it right. I urge you to just take your time when you're getting the shape down of what you're wanting to paint. You can erase and start over. These paper canvases are very, very forgiving. but acrylic is forgiving in general, because once I start painting, the water that I use to thin the acrylic paint is going to wash away these pencil marks. So you may be able to see a few of them, and you might be able to see some indentions, so it's important to mark lightly with a sharp pencil, because you'll get the most depth in your line with a sharp pencil, but without pressing. So so just lightly mark this, get the shape just right. I had to erase the entire stem at one point here and find my center here. So I've got the shape of the pumpkin, but I need where does the stem start? I need a reference where the stem starts. So then once I had that reference, then I got rolling on the sketch. So I'm working on the top here, and notice that the top almost makes a complete circle. Okay, now that I know where all of my lines will be, I can now think about where my stem is going to be. The end of the stem is a white color, a different color than the rest of the stem. And notice that the stem twists. So I'm getting some of the twisting lines down here, and it is a process. One of the top lines has to end right in the middle, and one of the bottom lines has to end about the middle too. And the ones that come from the top start in the middle and go to the outer upper edge. Now the base of each of the stem veins here has like a root that goes into the pumpkin. So I'm kind of identifying those. So it looks pretty good here. And a nice round shape. Now we're switching to our fine brush. I'm going to fill in the lines with just some burnt umber here, and I'm just adding a little water to thin it out like ink. This heavy-bodied acrylic paint is rather thick, so it needs to be thinned, especially when you're trying to do lines and things, when you're trying to control it. If it's clumping up on you or it's not moving fluidly enough, just add a little water and it will become more ink-like. A little water goes a long way. Acrylics are really forgiving, so you can just really keep going over it until you're happy. That's why I love acrylics. Oils you can blend right on the page. Acrylics you can't do that. They do dry a little faster than oils, but they're very forgiving. You can layer with acrylics. I love acrylics because you can just layer and layer and just go until you're happy with what you have. They do a really good job layering, and some of the colors show through from underneath, so it's like it does a blending job while it's layering. Acrylics are really fun and easy to use. Okay, I'm going to give the stem a really light brown just for shape, to start giving it some shape and some shadow. If you notice there at the bottom of the stem, or the underside of it, I kind of smeared it. And again, acrylics are really forgiving. I just added some water to my brush and erased it right off of the page. It's really easy to erase acrylic paint. Just add a little water to your brush. And I'm going to get some white, and just plain white. I haven't rinsed my brush. I've got a little brown in the brush itself, but I've just grabbed up some white to start my highlights. And I'm just going to the outer edge of each of the bumps here on the pumpkin, just to start with identifying where the light is coming from. And it's really important to think about where the light is coming from when you're painting anything. So at this, in this painting, the light is coming from the top left, but the outer part of the pumpkin is always lighter than the grooves. The grooves will always be more shaded. So I'm just giving it just some straight white. And like I said, I haven't rinsed my brush out, so it's mixing in the brush. So it's giving it a little bit of an antique look to the white. So I'm kind of going for like a burlap background feel with an antique look in the painting. Now these very back parts of the pumpkin are not quite as light as the front, so I'm just going to be real easy, and I'm mixing in now some darker color. I've got a lot of rich paint right on the brush, but I've got to be careful and control it. So I always, when I fill up my brush, I always dab it out on the plate so that I don't have too much when I touch the paper or the canvas. You might notice here that I have anchored my pinky finger onto the painting to give myself a little more control. I find a dry place on the painting. It's important that you don't lay your finger down in a wet paint, but you find a dry place on the painting and anchor yourself. It gives you a little more control. So now I'm filling in some of the places that were not white, some of the darker, shadier places. With the darker color. This gives it a more solid surface. So you can see here that I'm blending a little bit so that I don't have a clean line between the white and the darker color. Just blending on the page right now. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm just going to give the stem a little more definition here with a little darker lines. This gives it a little bit of shade or shadow in between the veins of the stem. So I want a little bit of shade before I start on the next color, which is emerald green. And it, like I said, the acrylics, they layer and those shades show up behind the paint. So we want to always layer and layer and layer until we're really happy with what we have. So I've got now the emerald green and the chrome yellow on the plate here, and I'm mixing in some white to make a really light yellow green that's going to go in between the vein lines on the stem. Okay, now I'm going to pick up some yellow and some white and make a really pastel yellow color to do some highlights. And I'm just going to pick up some highlights at the very top of the stem, or at the very right underneath the vein lines, to give it some highlight there. And I realize it's a little not yellow enough, so I added a little more yellow here. And some water to thin it out so that it's manageable. I love the heavy-bodied acrylics. They're a really good deal because you get thick paint that you can thin out, and it goes a long, long way. As you can see, I don't put much paint on my plate, and I use a lot of water to thin it out and make it stretch. So I'm very conservative with my paint. So I don't really pay a lot for the paper that I use, and it's really good paper, and I don't pay a lot for my brushes, and I make them work, and I don't pay a lot for the paint. Well, for 12 bottles of paint, I think it was $60, and they're very large bottles, so they go a really long way. I've had them a long time, and so they're really affordable. We can really make this an affordable hobby, something that does not cost a lot to do. The only real investment that you have is maybe a $20 easel, or the one I'm using is probably more like $30 or $40, but you can get them a really nice easel, a wooden easel, fold-away tabletop easel for $20, and I can link that below. I've got a couple that if people want to paint with me, if I have a friend over who likes to paint, they can use, I've got 2 spare easels. So those are really affordable. I love my little long easel, but the others they're kind of shorter. And I'll link both of those down below. So you can check them both out and see what you like. But get a tabletop easel and use a plastic garbage bag. I've got a clear plastic bag I use. And I just, whenever it's dry, when I'm done painting and I know all the paint on it is dry, I just fold it up and put it in my paint gear and reuse it every time. You can use paper towels, and you can use styrofoam plates, and the styrofoam plates do not soak up the paint. And you can use a little spray bottle with water to keep your paint wet. I always put my paint, the plate that I'm using, in a gallon-sized Ziploc bag when I'm waiting for things to dry, just so that my paint doesn't dry out. So you can make this a really affordable hobby. It doesn't take a lot of money to get started. You just need some paint, some really cheap brushes. You can get started and you can get the paint really cheap. You can get them for $1 a bottle at Walmart, the little acrylic bottles, the little 2-ounce bottles. I just like the heavy bodied, and I wanted to make that investment to get the larger bottles. And they do really go a long way. So once you save up for it and you're ready to, you can you can get the larger bottles, and they're a little bit more economical actually. So now I've added some white here and some yellow in the pumpkin. Now you might notice that there's a lot of color here. It doesn't look like a white pumpkin, but we are laying the background for the color that's going to be on top. Like I said before, acrylics layer, and they do a really good job of it. So when you do lay on the lightest color at the top, all these other beautiful colors, shades are going to show through. They're going to shine through, and they're going to give your pumpkin a lot of depth. So right now it might look dark, but I'm getting ready to paint the white on, and that I'm not going to paint it solid white, but I am going to let some of the colors shine through that I've got underneath and give it mostly a white color. So you can put on as much white as you want to make it more white. If you get it too thick, then it will not shine the colors through. But as you can see here, it definitely is starting to look like a white pumpkin now. Another tip I can give you is that you don't have to rinse out your brush between colors. You've got them on the plate. You're not going to mix them back in the bottle. But you can use that brush to let your colors blend within the brush. Now, if you notice there, I covered up one of the main lines, and when I tried to dab it off with my finger, it did not dab. So I'll have to go back in and put that line back in. I even try to use the water trick to erase that line, but I had to actually go back in and get some more burnt umber and redefine those grooves. I'm just gonna get some dark, I'm gonna make a foundation for this pumpkin, and I kind of want to just kind of scrub along the bottom here. A little more water. Just gonna kind of, I've created myself a little line here to go by. I'm going to be really careful when I get to the pumpkin here not to cover it up. So I've got a hill a little higher on this side, so I'm just going to take a little bit more care here and even out the ground. So we're kind of on a hill here. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Yeah, that looks better. And we're kind of working with some ground here. I don't know if I'm going to do grass or leaves or what I'm going to do. But we've got some kind of foundation here. It's not real even, it's just kind of organic, I guess, in nature. Now, I do have a shadow, so I know that my light's coming in from this side So I'm gonna get my brush a little darkness here, darken it up a bit, and kind of come in with some shadow here. Just right around the pumpkin bottom here, and it's just it's round because the pumpkin's round, but it's not real shapely, you know. And so just kind of some shadow right there. Not real defined, just enough to know that there's some light coming in. It's a shadow. The last thing I'm going to do is flick or splatter my painting, and it adds some texture to the painting. I really like the way that it looks. Well, I hope you enjoyed painting with me. Please comment below and like the video if you really liked the video, and subscribe if you'd like to see more of these. Thank you. Have a great one.